So officially welcome everybody who's here so far. It's three of us right now. Welcome, Stefan. Looks like somebody's in a tractor cab. Might be a good spot. Anyhow, I had a few things to talk about, specifically from what Brian was kind of he texted me this morning, and he said there's a few things that he wanted to really accomplish in the meeting since he can't be here. The first and the biggest one he said was documentation. Just that the documentation of AgOpenGPS is so far behind. And so that would be the biggest thing. There's probably two fashions for that. One is the documentation in the big AgOpenGPS file from GitHub. And then the other one would be on the wiki that everybody's reading that way. I think the best way to go about it might be to update the wiki first and have everything on there the way we want it, and then we can make sure that the documentation that's in the AgOpenGPS file matches everything else. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it's a reasonable idea, but the main problem is, as usual, someone needs to do it, and if the person who wants to do it like to do it the other way around, I'm still happy that someone will update the documentation.
Yeah, I started in the wiki just a little bit, but then I thought, I don't know if I really want to erase everything that's here, but I almost feel like that's what we need to do, is just almost wipe that whole slate clean and then start over, and start fresh with the way things are right now. That I don't know if there's a way to do that where we can maintain the old version. I noticed in the top right hand corner of Andreas's wiki site there is a way that you can look at old versions, but I'm just wondering if someone went through and just started over, if we could still go back and see how things were like today, for example. Do you know if that's a possibility?
I think it's, as long as you don't erase the whole wiki or only clean up some pages, I think you can go back, but I think the average user won't do it. So for making, I think the best way, if you want to stay on a clean page, is to start on some hidden page.
Yes.
And set up, and then if you're finished, copy it all to the main page, so you don't have the main page a few days, weeks in some undefined state.
Right. Hello, Andrew and Stefan. I don't know if you can hear us or not, but I was saying to Doppelgrau that we have, Brian's not here with us today. He's busy harvesting, and he had a few things that he wanted to bring up, and one of the things was documentation, and that's what we're kind of talking about now, is just how best to go about documenting what's in AgOpenGPS right now. So if one of the other things I wanted to say about that too was, we're all speaking in English right now just because it seems to be the best common language, but I know for users, if we start with the English wiki, and then if we had some people able to translate for the other languages, that might be really helpful. That might be a little too much to ask, but what are your thoughts that way?
If nobody else responds, then I will respond. I would say we should define one language as the main/leading language, and for some reasons, as a native German speaker, I don't really understand. It seems to be English, because most people at least understand it. And so I would say after documentation is updated, I would say, or I would even suggest to delete outdated translations so that the people won't get the outdated translations. And well, I don't know if it's in that wiki easier to delete it completely or put a large outdated, please use the English version until someone has translated it again. But I think that's the most reasonable approach, since we all have not enough time to do everything we want to do.
I don't think we should distract Andreas too much. It looks like he's driving.
Yes, I'm in the car. I'm on the way home.
Okay, so we're just talking about the wiki and about revising it and sort of starting over. As far as getting a up-to-date version, is there a way, Andreas, where we can keep the old version that's currently there, so that as we're going and updating it, that we don't lose everything that's there right now?
You want to do a new wiki?
Well, not new, but we want to update it, but while it's being updated, we don't want to lose what's there.
Okay, you can create a new namespace.
Okay.
And it's called AgOpen2 or someone else. And you can start from the new one, and later we can delete the old namespace.
Okay. Now comes the fun part. So who's going to do it? Well, I'll offer. I can start out with a part of it. It'd be really neat if we could split that up as between who's in the meetings here and maybe in the Telegram group. If we put something up there, as far as if we each took a little section to reflect where we're at right now, that would be super helpful. Do you guys think that's a good way to go about it?
Yeah, I think so. That's the very good way to do that. Hi everyone, just connected, and I'd like to help some writing that wiki.
Okay, excellent. So I think if we just go section by section, so maybe just I want to say a show of hands, but who has built the Brian's version 2 auto steer board, the PCB board? Has anybody built that version?
Not yet for me, because time is very how do you call it, expensive. Time very expensive, and but it will be a winter project for me. So then I can write about it. So, but I can write about anything else except the auto steer board.
Yeah. Okay. So from what Brian had said earlier, so that's tackling that documentation subject, and he says that's the biggest limitation. And then he said that his focus so far is trying to simplify what we do have in AgOpenGPS and try and make it as user-friendly as possible. So right now, it's kind of to the outside person who maybe not too familiar with electronics and anything like that, it's really daunting to come in and see all these rat's nests of wires and boards and hooked up in a cab, and to really simplify that, and even in the GUI, the GUI, that would be helpful too. And that's what Brian's really working on. So that's what we had talked about in a couple previous meetings, that we stick with his PCB board as being the way forward, that if anybody comes in
we have that PCB and we go from there. That way we're not always trying to answer people's questions who have a different setup. That way everyone's got the same setup and we can answer questions that people have as they come up. Now I know Doppelgrau has his board too, and that's a really nice board too, using the ESP32 and that kind of thing. So there is still space for that, and anybody can, of course, do the point-to-point wiring. But moving forward, just to keep things simple and make it easier for everybody and have a sort of a common goal, we're going to use Brian's version 2 PCB board going from here. So I myself have not built the board either. I was trying to get a hold of a couple that were in Canada. Another guy had posted that on Combine Forum, and I wanted to build one too. Right now I just have point-to-point wiring. So I think any of us who have a setup like that can easily answer how to do the PCB board too. It's just point-to-point wiring, except most of it's already done. Having said that, if we go to, are there any, I guess, concerns with the PCB board as it is that we need to address before we say this is the standard and go from here?
I got a small issue with the PCB board for me now, because I use the hydraulic valve. The PCB board is missing connections for the encoder in your steering wheel. So I think that should be a good way to have that also in the other board before make a official version thing.
Okay. Does anybody using the PCB board and hydraulic valves currently? Because are you, sorry, Richard, which motor driver are you using? Are you using the
for now I'm using the IBT2.
Okay, yep.
But as I read, the MC13 should also do the same trick with a hydraulic valve, because the signals are eventually the same.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Okay, are there any other things missing from the PCB board that that other people know of?
Not for me.
I don't know any problem, but the only thing I would say, it might be a reason to consider if the parts, the boards soldered onto the PCB are have a second source or something like that, so or have a good availability. So if we now standardize on the PCB board too, and in 2 or 3 months one of the main components gets not available readily, then it would be, well, annoying, because then we get the problem with where it's standardized but the people don't get the parts or something like that. But I don't know if there's a real problem for the parts used or not. But I've heard sometimes from, I think it's from Andreas, that some parts you can buy in America without problems are sometimes problematic in Europe or the other way around. So I think that might be a problem, at least in the longer one, but I don't really know how to fix it.
Okay. Is the DigiKey a problem with everybody in Europe as far as sourcing parts through there, or is that enough of an international buying location, I guess you'd say?
For me, I can buy everything needed for the Ardusimple board by DigiKey in Holland. So I think that should be working. Okay.
How about in Austria? Do you have any issues there, Andreas, as far as DigiKey?
Yes, DigiKey is available. And the most time I like to buy parts from Amazon.
Right.
So for me, it's the easiest way to get parts from Amazon. There's a German one who builds the BNO 05. It's Blue Dot, and he sells over Amazon, and I can also buy the BNOs from him. And I also buy the MMI M852 from Amazon. It's called GU 45, I think. So for me, it's the easiest way to get parts from Amazon.
Okay. I was just wondering if we needed a different bill of materials list available for different people in different countries as far as going to a different supplier. But
yes, some Spark Fun things are not ever. You often see it here and there, and if I want to get 10 or 20 pieces, it's a problem. It's
Okay.
also with the motor drivers. I don't use the IPT2. I always buy the Cytron, the 30 amp board, and I also buy it direct from Malaysia. It's the fastest way. So if I order there, they are here in 4 days, and I have to pay a bit of customs, but I did get 20 pieces. It's no problem.
okay. Can you put that in the chat, Andreas, that the supplier you were talking about, just so everybody has it? Might not need it, but just in case some people do, that might be helpful.
I don't understand.
If you could just list that supplier you were talking about in the chat, that's in Zoom
The supplier?
here. Yeah.
Also, Cytron. You
Oh,
can
no.
buy directed Cytron.
Okay, so you're just buying direct from Cytron then. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to ask another thing. Oh, this came up earlier in the Telegram group. We're talking about the dual antenna from Ardusimple.
Yes.
And as far as it having, I think it outputs UBX instead of NMEA, and there were some questions about if it's going to work with AgOpenGPS, but you had said from Intergeo that there was an AgOpen specific board from Ardusimple. Is that still, so should we be looking at that one going forward, or is that what is called RTK2B Lite? Is that the one we need to look at?
The board from Austrian is on the way. So I did see a prototype of it, and I think I would also get one of it. I think they would make a very modular board, so you can done everything of it. As the new board will be called Austrian Pro, and it will have 2 XP connectors behind. And on the front, it will have a second connector to put a second F9 on it. So the design is not 100% finished, but I think there would be another F9 board. It's not the light board, but it would be a board that fits on the front. So you can use the XP boards to put on it a ASP32, and you can use the second board for long range or whatever you want. And I think they would also put a microcontroller on the Pro board. So the controller will pass the UBX from the second and will generate an EMEA sentence. Yes, it's not 100% finished, but that would be a connector in the front with RS232, USB, maybe Ethernet, and so on. and all in an enclosure.
Oh wow. Okay, so a weatherproof enclosure, or just a regular box enclosure, no IP rating?
It could be IP65. I think the only problem is the connectors on the outside. But weatherproof I don't think it's really needed. No? It's always in the cabin.
Yeah.
And if you like it weatherproof, you can put it in another box. But the main thing, it's proof from dust, and it has better connectors than the old one was.
Very good.
Yes. I also will get a board from Unicore.com in the next few days. And I will see how that would work.
So was that that's all that you saw at InterGeo then, Andreas, as far as the up and coming things?
I was also talking with Emlet. They would have a new M2. It's based on the F9B, and like all other products with the microcontroller, Bluetooth, with WLAN. Also, it would be also a very simple board to use. And the price would be, glaube ich, 100 to 200 euro over the old Emerald Ridge M Plus.
Okay, that's exciting. Seeing all those products there. Is there, at this point in time, I wanted to just double check here if there was other things. Oh yeah, so another thing Brian asked was, he says, my focus has been simplifying it and as user-friendly as much as possible. And then he says, perhaps a good topic is what other areas are tricky. So as far as in AgOpenGPS, what areas right now are tricky if you were like a new user coming in, and what needs simplifying? What's tricky right now?
One part is to save NTRIP settings.
Okay.
So that's what's a little bit frustrating. If you have a new version, you don't need to put in all data again. That's one. It's not tricky, but it's not fun to do it every time. And tricky. Now with the wheel angel sensor and the display, I think that's one of the most parts was getting better, that the user sees what's going on. And one time tricky is to set up the steering. That is what the most have problems. So if you use the P&O, you need to set down it, and if you use not the P&O, you have to set the distance to look back to a higher value.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's, the more I realize working with it, how setting that steer 0 and setting the counts per degree and all that kind of thing, I think that's probably the most tricky part of it for a new user anyway. Once you get used to it, you just kind of know how to make it work. But coming in right off the bat, that's probably the hardest part. Another thing I noticed too that might be tricky, as every time a new version comes out, when I'm going back into a field and I've deleted the AgOpenGPS folder, then I need to clone a new field or clone the boundaries from a new field. Because otherwise I get the error message saying, this is an old version, that kind of thing. So that might be a different way to save even just the field boundaries, so that they're all there every time a new version comes out. Might be something that might be helpful. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I also think when there's going to be a new update, I think Brian should insert a version number for every update he does, so that you always have backwards compatibility. If the version doesn't work for you, you can always go back and you know where you're from. And now it's all 3.0, but you have no idea which update are you using.
Absolutely, yeah. That was from a few of the last video meetings too. We've been talking a lot about that as far as figuring out how GitHub works, and I think a lot of that is just a learning curve thing.
Yes.
I think hopefully that'll start to get a little better that way. There's some guys on here that are really familiar with GitHub and how you can do versioning really well, and that's something that I think that would be really helpful. I would agree, just having version numbers, and then at least knowing if there's a bug, then well, we can go back to a previous version. That would be very helpful, I would agree.
And maybe also for me, it was a little bit difficult to find out what all the auto-steer sliders are actually doing, like proportional gain, output gain, what happens if you raise the count per degree and everything else. So it's also a part that should be written in the wiki with a little of simple language to everyone, that they know what they do with all the sliders.
Yeah. I know Brian has a bunch of videos there that he's put up in the last little bit that have been super helpful that way. And I think if when we update this wiki as we're going through it, we should just plug those videos in at every time when we mention one of those. I think one thing that might help that too is if maybe in the versions moving forward, if you pick your setup, for example, and you click just like we do now, what are you using for an IMU, right? Are you using the brick? Are you using the Beano? If we have that checklist and maybe we say, well, what are you using for steering? Are you using the fidgets motor against the steering wheel? Are you using hydraulic valves? If we have those, then maybe some of those default settings for proportional gain and integral gain and all those things can already be plugged in, because I think now everything defaults to 5, 5, and 5 or something like that. So that might be another option too, as far as getting defaults in place.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good option, I think. You should to have a sort of a wizard view where you can answer all these questions, and then everything should be inserted in all the setup files.
Yeah. All right, I see it's 1:30 here now, or by me anyway. It's half an hour later than when we started. Are there any other topics that we want to just bring up right now that kind of a free-for-all, or just have a little discussion here on what we'd like to see happen with AgOpenGPS, or issues or suggestions, anything like that, and then we'll kind of make note of them and post them up there so we can know what to address in the wiki.
Yeah, I had something, but I don't remember what it was. There's a lot going on, and Brian has major updates recently. Also, the touch boundaries and everything, and that's a really awesome function. I talked about him about that a week ago, and yeah, he saw the idea because here in Holland we like to start at the very nearest boundary, so almost at the neighbor's field. And after a week, he just inserted that thing in AgOpenGPS, exactly what I asked. So the development is going very fast for me.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm always amazed at how he has the time to do these things. And
Absolutely.
I know I certainly don't. And another thing, what he had said to, what was it here? He says, I've moved most of the setup
to one form as well. He says he's made some more tabs like the antenna, etc. It was getting cluttered. The GPS IMU settings are just IMU now, and the rest in the main settings. Some things like that. And then the other thing too with the, has anybody tried the AB Touch or the Touch Designer? Other than Richard?
For me, only in the simulator. I had some problems with the new version. I can't open it on my tablet PC, so I threw the whole thing empty and reinstall Windows, and then now it works. But I have to test it out in the field. But for me, it's awesome. It's really awesome.
Yeah. One thing we had before, and I just mentioned that to Brian, was a Headland Designer, where you could go in and you could draw a line where you wanted your headland to be. And I think that he's thinking of bringing that back with some combined with U-turn settings, so that's all in one spot, along with the Touch Designer. But I think for us anyway, when we plant corn and say you have an odd shaped field at the beginning of your headland, the sides are straight but the end might be crooked, we like to just have a 90-degree AB line and then fill things in. But we want to know exactly when to stop the planter as we're coming up to the end of the row, so that we know where the headland passes are going to be. So that was a nice thing from the Headland Designer in the past, that you could, once you came to that point, it would automatically, it would beep at you, or you would know you were in the headland. So that was a nice feature to be able to actually just draw that in. I don't know if there's anything else people have thoughts about that way.
Yeah, about the headland feature, I know it familiar. It's from Raven SBG. It's also a sort of headland function, and you can just choose a boundary line, like north or south or everything, and then set the headlands to like 24 meters from boundary. There's my headlands, and then if you driving the AB lines from the north side, every time you hit the headland line, it will beeps or flashes the screen. So hey, you're in your headland now. But yeah, that software hadn't U-turn, so maybe it's not exactly necessary. But I know not for everyone is U-turn working, especially when you have a small seeder like 3 meters. The U-turn is not the very best idea to turn over. But that should be a good function, I think. So if you just choose a boundary line and then say to the software, 24 meters from in fields, there's my headland, or something like that.
Yes, I think that I did ask Brian to have this in the next version, but because I think it's already in AgOpenGPS, because you can you have the red line and you can move it into it now. And I also need this feature every year. For example, you have a field who has many curves and I'm plowing, so I move the boundary in the field and I have a line, and as you said, I need at this position I lift my tour. Also with seeding and other things, I'm like to drive 3 or 4 times at the end around the field. So I know at which point I have to stop my work. So in Europe, we can't use U-turn or such other things, so we do it by hand.
Yes.
And this would be good if there's a line and if there is a beep or something visual to say, okay, now you have driven over this line.
It should also be nice to like the U-turn. You can see how many meters it's before you entering the headland line.
Yes, and in the old version, I did use the contour function, and if you you know, at the past there were two triangles on the left and the right side.
Yes.
And I did make a tour that was 10 meters, and always if the triangle comes to the boundary, I did know, oh no, I'm finished. So in the past I did use this function to see, okay, now I'm at the headland.
Yeah, that was, I remember that too. And I think the other thing we did have at one point in time was as soon as you had, I think you could probably still set it up that way, but you had an outer boundary and the inner boundary. And as soon as you hit the inner boundary, the screen turned red or something like that. I can't quite remember. Or no, it was as soon as you were in the headland, then the screen turned red. And then I know if you had things set to auto, then
it's the geofence.
Yeah.
You set geofence to 10 meters, then you, if you drive over this line, the screen gets red. And I think with the geofence, it works, but maybe there could be a second geofence for the headlands.
Yeah, I think that might be, because that's what we sort of used to have, right? We had the headland, and it used to turn red in the headland, and now it turns red once you go outside the geofence. So I noticed one issue I had, I was raking a field, and I came to the end of the field, and I made the U-turn myself manually. And then, of course, it thought the working width of the rake was outside the geofence, which it wasn't. But then once you do that, then auto steer automatically turns off. So I think what you're saying, Andreas, would be a good idea to, have that in place.
Yes.
Yes, for me also, it's should be a good function to implement that. And I have a second question, already asked it before, and there's also a topic on it on the Combined forum about tramlines. You can now set the tramlines at the exact EB line, but for me it's not working because my tramline is exactly between two work paths. So this, for me, it should be working when you have a complete dedicated line to next to your EB line that you can set from the boundary. So, like the first one is about just entering the width of your tram line. So if my seeder is like 3 meters, my sprayer is like 24 meters, and then you can just insert a value for the tram line, and it's just a visual thing that you can see on the screen first, where my tram line valve should be. If you understand.
I'm having a little bit of trouble picturing it. I think there might be a way you can actually draw. I'm trying to think here. If I share a screen, yeah, if we go whiteboard, I think I can. Can you see what I have here now? If I draw, this is pretty poor here, but can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, so if that's your field, can you draw on that one there, Richard? Maybe you can't.
What do you mean?
Can you do the same thing? Can you draw on?
Oh,
on this
I don't know.
whiteboard?
It's on my phone, so
okay.
Maybe I can. Pen, and then there's your EB line.
Yeah.
Like that, and then when at 24 meters, you can insert just a dedicated line, non-drivable. Why it doesn't? Yeah, it works now. And then it shows up there, always started from this boundary.
Okay, so I guess you just want that to be able to be seen on the field at all times whenever you're in that field. That doesn't
move
at all.
You choose the boundary side, like this way, and then you just enter a tram line at first tram line 24 meters or 12 meters or whatever, and because the first one is always when it's 24 meters or 48, doesn't matter. It's always a half half the width of a normal tramline. So there should be a little math to make it. But because this section is 12, but the next one should be then 24.
I see. I see.
So he has the problem that he has the tram line between two AB lines. So passing
Yes.
two AB lines, he has to, yes, that is theta to make the tram line.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, that makes sense.
We in Europe with our small toy thetas.
All right, I got to figure out how to get back to my screen now. I don't know how I did that. Here it is. There. That was pretty helpful. Okay, it's 1:41 now. 40 minutes later, wherever you are. There was, I think, only one other thing that I wanted to get there. Sorry, just looking through the conversation we had there.
I have not. I have only one thing now.
Yeah.
It's not to me, but there are many German users having cows and moving the grass for the cows, and it's not like in Canada or in other the world. They have 100 hectares and they have 20 or 30 fields. So for they, it's not easy to always choose the field and select the new boundaries and the AP lines. And if you had see the video from Farm Theory, this is the guy from England who's also done an auto steer, and he has something like a field detection. So if you're driving around, all the fields are on the screen, and if he drives inside the field, the software says, "Oh, you are on this field," and you can select the field, and it comes up, and you have all AP lines. Mm-hmm. So I think this is future design, and it's very many work. But that would be a cool thing. So you have set up all your fields, and you see into the picture, and you have the AP lines inside the fields. And if you drive into the field is coming up, and you select, okay, I'm doing this work, and so on. But yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, that is a big thing. I've been thinking the same thing. I used to use Farmer GPS, which it's another program another guy from Alberta actually made, but it did the same thing. You would drive into a field, and then automatically it would have the AB lines saved for that field, and that would pop up. The boundaries would be there, and you, like you said, you just pick the job you're doing, and then it knew which implement you're using, and that would automatically be filled in. That would definitely help. Now, I think something coming from that would be like how we do things in the KML files now with Google Earth. I know here anyway, we work with shape files a lot and just being able to import them. So at the same time, that would be a neat thing too, right? You could pick how you import the fields, if it's a KML file, or if it's a shape file, or if it's you actually go around and you draw the boundary, but that they would all be kind of saved the same way. And that sounds like a big coding nightmare to me, but
absolutely.
Yeah,
I think so too. I know from another GPS system, when you opening your field selection, it shows the nearest field. So if you have like 50 fields or so, it's always, you drive through fields, and then you open the field viewer, and then you can see the field that is nearest to you. So it knows where you are, and then says, maybe you want to play on this field like a while. For sorting the list, so you don't have to scroll through every field you have.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, is there anything else that anybody else wants to bring up or add or change? So we've got about 15 minutes left here. Wanted to see if there's anything else anybody wanted to talk about.
I have to be back in a few minutes. I have to do something little thing, so I will be excused.
Okay.
I need also to go now.
Oh, all right. Well, let's just wrap it up then. I think if we've all said our piece, then we'll continue from there. I'm going to post on either on Telegram or the Combine forum, just kind of a sort of a sign-up list for who wants to do what section of the wiki. And that way we can get that updated to where it needs to be today. So,
okay.
Great. Then we'll say goodbye, and till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.